Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you tonight. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you so much on a cold winter's night to be out for Bible study. We appreciate that so much. We started a new study last Wednesday night discussing the miracles of Jesus. Jesus did lots of miracles. We're going to be talking about a lot of them through the course of these lessons. I think one of the things that there's several things about miracles that we always want to stress. One of the very important things about miracles is that they always had a purpose. And the purpose was not just for doing what they were doing. For instance, we're going to talk about two different events where Jesus healed people tonight. The people who received the healing certainly got a great benefit from the miracle that was performed. But the miracle was not just for the benefit of that person who received that immediate blessing. There were lots of people who, even in that time period, who did not receive healings. The healings were not for healing's sake. The healings were always for the evidence or the proof that they provided. Now, that's really important when we talk about, are there miracles today? Well, when we talk about are there miracles today, what would be the purpose of miracles today? We don't need to have Jesus confirmed or proven to be the Son of God. We don't need the Bible confirmed or verified to be the inspired Word of God. And that was the purpose, to confirm God's message, to confirm Jesus, to confirm the inspiration of the Scriptures. Those things have already been done and completed. The purpose that the miracles existed for has been fulfilled and not needed anymore. And so that's one of the, and we'll talk along those lines more as we continue this study. But, always remember when we're talking about miracles with people, they had a very distinctive purpose. Very important, extremely important for our faith. That the miracles were performed and provided that evidence. But that has all been accomplished. Once in a while we'll get people who say, well, you just don't even believe miracles, do you? Oh yeah. We believe every miracle that the Bible records. We believe them exactly in full detail. We believe the miracles absolutely did happen. But we believe they have fulfilled their purpose and don't exist anymore. We'll talk more as the weeks go on as we talk about miracles. Any thoughts or comments along those lines?
I always think of, when you talk about miracles, I always think about Nicodemus. When he came to Jesus, that no one can do the things that you do unless God is with you.
Yeah. It was obvious. It was obvious, yeah. All right, so let's look at a couple of different events wherein Jesus healed people. There were different kind of miracles that Jesus performed, but healings were fairly regular events in regards to the different healings different miracles that Jesus did. Let's look at John chapter 4, beginning verse 46. John 4:46. So Jesus came again into Cana of Galilee, where he made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus was come out of Judea into Galilee, he went unto him and besought him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then said Jesus unto him, Except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe. The nobleman said unto him, Sir, come down ere my child die. Jesus said unto him, Go thy way, thy son liveth. And the man believed the word that Jesus had spoken unto him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Thy son liveth. Then inquired he of them the hour when he began to amend. And they said unto him, Yesterday, at the 7th hour, the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said unto him, Thy son liveth, and himself believed, and his whole house. This is again the second miracle that Jesus did when he was come out of Judea into Galilee. All right. So a couple of things sort of are interesting about this event in particular. Did you notice the remote aspect Jesus never saw this son who was sick. Jesus was in, verse 46, Jesus was in Cana of Galilee. The sick son was at Capernaum. Now, if you check that, if you look at a map or you do any investigation, you find out that that's about 16 and a half miles distant. Cana is about 16 and a half miles distant from Capernaum. Jesus never saw the person who was sick. That sick person never saw Jesus, was never in his presence, and yet the miracle took place. One of the things that sometimes happens is, if there's a failed miracle. So, I think it's so amazing to contrast these fake, I call them fake healers today versus faith healers in the Bible. The fake healers of today, they're obviously going to fail, right? They can't do any miracles. And they can't do any verifiable miracles. As I told you last week, one of the things that they often claim to perform miracles that you can't see. This guy said, I was deaf in this ear, and that guy did a miracle, now I can hear in this ear. Well, you know what? I couldn't see his deafness before, and I can't see now that it's healed. It's not verifiable. I think I've told you before, a number of years ago, another Christian and I, we went to a faith healing service, and it was a woman. I think her last name was Peterson. I should be able to remember her name. She was she was in the Oral Roberts camp. She worked with Oral Roberts. She had a faith healing rally, and people were lined up on the stage coming to get her to do various healings. None of them were obvious, but I distinctly remember one time. One of the things that happened was all of a sudden she just stopped. And she said, "It has come to me. There's somebody in the audience. There's some woman here in the audience. And they've just found a lump in the breast. Who is that? Who is that?" She looked up, "Who is that?" And this woman who was sitting just like about as far from me as what Jill is, she very timidly raised her hand, And the woman saw her. She said, "I tell you what, you are healed. What I want you to do, I want you to excuse yourself and go to the bathroom. I want you to check and come back and report to us that lump in your breast is gone." Well, I watched her. She never left her seat. And so the thing went on for several more minutes, and about 20 minutes later, she said, "Honey, did you go check? Is the lump gone from your breast?" And the woman said, "Yes." She didn't know that. She hadn't done anything to even check for herself, much less any of the rest of us could have possibly known whether it was there before and gone now. That's the nature of these fake miracles that they're claiming today versus the very provable kind of miracles that Jesus performed. But I got sidetracked there. One of the things that, if the miracle fails, and they always fail, but if it's very obvious that the miracle fails, they say that the recipient person lacked sufficient faith. That if that recipient person had had enough faith, then the miracle would have happened. Well, what about this case? In this case, the sick boy wasn't even there where Jesus was. Very likely, he wasn't even cognizant of what was going on. He was near death, it says. And so that boy didn't have any faith to receive a miracle. And yet he received it, right? And there's just repeated cases like that where the one who received the miracle didn't have any faith at all. We could look at other examples, but just make that point in your mind, that is an argument made, and it's a flawed argument. Thoughts or comments here? Tom?
Evidently, Jesus' reputation is already starting to spread. Because this man had heard that Jesus was in Galilee. And he went to where he was and went to it. So, here his son's sick. He heard about Jesus. He traveled this distance down to where Jesus was, talked to him about it, and then he had to travel back to find out.
And it was the next day before.
He left his son
I was almost a day's journey to
Yeah.
get to Jesus.
Yeah.
So, you know, he said,
I think that's really a good observation. And one of the things that makes me wonder, notice verse 54 here says this is the second miracle that Jesus did when he was come out of Judea into Galilee. My question is, how did the man know that, or even suspect that Jesus could have done that? To our very best of our knowledge, and it says here this was just the second miracle that he performed. He hadn't done any healings before that. How would this father have known or suspected that Jesus could do that? Any thoughts on that? I don't know if I have an answer on that. Wade?
Well, it says here in verse 48, so when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him only because they had seen all the things that he did in Jerusalem at the feast. For they themselves.
But where are you reading?
45.
Oh, 45, okay.
Maybe they,
So he's, well, the point at a minimum is what Tom said. His reputation is spreading. I don't know that he'd ever done an act of healing before.
maybe Greg, you may, you know, maybe it been some people traveled from the wedding feast, and told about that.
Yeah, very possible. Because he's in the same city where the wedding feast took place, and Capernaum is about 16 miles away. So that news of that would have spread. And maybe the guy just extrapolated. If he can turn water to wine, I bet he can heal my son too. And it may have been that. All right. It says, I asked the question, what rank did the father possess? It says that, the King James says that he was a nobleman. The New American Standard Version says he was a royal official. McGarvey said he almost certainly then would have been an official serving under Herod Antipas, who would have been they called him a tetrarch over a fourth. The descendants of Herod the Great had divided up his realm. They were all underlings to the Romans, but they had Jewish connection. Herod the Great had built the temple in Jerusalem. They weren't literal Jews. They weren't physical Jews, the Herod family, but they had come to participate in the Jews' religion. And this Herod Antipas would have been over Galilee. And when it says that he was a royal official, almost certainly he was in some capacity over Herod Antipas in that area. You know, you have to think that somebody like that, a royal official, that's not the person who would usually come to a religious teacher like Jesus, right? Probably most often they would be pretty aloof from that. So that's what the common people do. The common people seek after someone like Jesus. But it's interesting that when there's an urgent need, people forget those kinds of lines of distinction. And that's probably the case here. This affliction of his son brought him to Jesus with the hope that something could be done for his son. The degree of sickness of this son is pretty significant. It says there that at the end of verse 47 that he was at the point of death. So this wasn't anything minor. This was very critical. It wasn't, and so this healing was not just some slight thing. When Jesus remotely healed the son, it wasn't like he cured him of a common cold. This was really serious. He was at the point of death. And you know, sometimes people will argue, folks back then were so ignorant and uneducated and malinformed that they didn't know. They couldn't even judge a person's medical condition. You know that's just not true. Of course they knew. They dealt much more regularly with death than we do. They knew when this is I would argue this is a very accurate evaluation. He's at the point of death. He's very near death. He will die very soon. I don't think that there was any doubt about that. That is legitimate evaluation of the son's condition. And so this wasn't just a minor thing. This wasn't healing somebody of hearing loss or headaches. This is healing a person who is certainly so sick they are at the point of death. What was the sickness? We don't know. It doesn't say, and we couldn't speculate at all. But again, I'm arguing that even though these people are 2,000 years removed from us, they knew when a sickness was of that degree that the person was soon to die. Yeah. Somebody, wait.
It does say here that in verse 52 that the fever left him. So the sickness
Yeah.
had to have some
It had a fever with it, didn't it?
Some type of infection.
Yeah. Good point. So, what do you think about verse 48? Do you take this as to be a rebuke on the part of Jesus, that he's rebuking the nobleman? Verse 48, Jesus said unto him, except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe. What's your thoughts on that statement?
New American Standard, but you people. I don't think he's addressing the man specifically, because he came to him and he believed in what Jesus could possibly do. But it's in general the attitude of the masses, at least right now, and people who are the leaders later on, and probably leaders around them. He scolds Pharisees later on when they keep asking for signs, even with the signs they're not going to believe. So I think it's in general, he's pointing to people and knows their hearts. And he says, if you just listen and understood and knew the scriptures, you believe me. But I'm having to do this so you need this.
So this is a more general statement, not just about the man particularly, but about the people at large, that they sought a sign. Wayne?
Yeah, I thought I read he just came out of Galilee.
Yeah, at verse 45.
Where he said that they would not believe him. A prophet is without honor except in his hometown.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't believe in him. It could be related to that.
Maybe so. He's back. This is where he grew up. He's back near where he grew up. And, you know, I've used the illustration before. You know, I've got one brother, and someone tries to tell me that my brother is something extra special. Are you kidding? He's my brother. I've known him since he was a snot-nosed kid. You know, we used to fight all the time. You'd want me to believe that my brother is somebody special? I think that's the idea that Wayne is pointing out. And Jesus said so in another place, a prophet is not without honor save in his own home and his own country. Might be a little hard to believe. Wade?
I think sometimes Jesus says stuff to make people just think. Because I know at one point he did a miracle and he told them, don't go and tell anybody. But they went and told them.
Yeah, that was more than once,
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Jesus knew that they were going to go tell people.
Yeah.
So, but he did, I think sometimes he just said things for reaction and to get people to think.
Yeah. I'm wondering from verse 48, though, if what would have been the case? Do you think that one of the more elite people in society, this guy's a nobleman. King James says nobleman. New American Standard says he's a royal official. Do you think a person like that would have typically come to Jesus? I'm thinking probably not. But whenever there's a great need, whenever there's a serious problem and you're grasping at straws for help, for relief, you'll do what you might not have been willing to do otherwise. And that's what this guy did. You know, I think that's true even in the lives of people today. And we've probably all experienced things like that. Someone who doesn't have any interest at all in religion, but then they get either seriously sick, or maybe a loved one is very seriously sick, or some crisis some problem comes up in their life, and then they turn to religion. People just still do that somewhat. And whatever brings people to a realization of their spiritual needs is, that's a good thing if they become aware of their spiritual need. But this guy, I got a feeling that this guy probably would not have come to Jesus. Jesus had already done a good bit of teaching before this. Would he have come just on the basis of what he'd heard, or was it going to take that special need with his son? I think it's probably the latter. So Jesus tells the father, go home, go thy way, thy son liveth. Now there's kind of an interesting, see what you think about the difference in wording of verse 50. The man believed the word that Jesus had spoken unto him. What was that word? Thy son liveth. He believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, went his way. But then down in verse 53, when the father knew that it was the same hour, that his son got well, the same hour that he spoke, in which Jesus said to him, thy son liveth, and himself believed and his whole house. I may be straining at a point here, but it seems to me that initially he believed Jesus said, your son is going to live. He believed that. When he found out, in fact, that the son is better, and it happened at the very time that Jesus said that, I think that when it says himself believed in his whole, now he's believing in Jesus. He's not just believing your son will get well, he's believing in Jesus. Does that seem to bear out in the way that that's worded? Wayne?
Yeah, plus the fact that he obviously testified to his whole household.
Yeah.
To his whole household. And he would have been overjoyed by the fact that his son was recovered now, and would have told all of his family who it was that caused him to
Yeah.
be healed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's right. He now
So let me play the part of the skeptic. Hey, people get sick and they get well. He was going to get well anyway. How would you answer a skeptic and say, people get sick, people get over their sicknesses. This kid would have gotten well on his own. It just happened to be a matter of chance luck that he got well at that time. Wayne?
I was just going to say, he verified it. He asked what time his son got better.
He didn't tell him.
Yeah, well,
He asked the question without giving them, they provided the answer to confirm what he was thinking.
Yeah, he was asking in verse 52. He inquired in the hour that he began, and they said to him yesterday at the 11th hour.
Yeah.
So he verified when it was.
Yeah.
And it is awfully coincidental if it's a...
Yeah. Wait.
Do you think he was a Jew? Do you think he was a Jew?
Well, as I said earlier, the Herod family practiced the Jews' religion nominally. And this guy was probably an officer in Herod's court. And so he would have been a nominal Jew. They weren't, the Herods were Edomians, but they practiced Jews' religion. As I said earlier, Herod the Great built the temple in Jerusalem. And so they were participants in the Jews' religion. They weren't literal Jews in their ancestry. Okay. Again, notice the purpose of miracles. We always want to stress that. When the Father knew that it was this, verse 53, when the Father knew that it was the same hour in which Jesus had said to him, thy son liveth, and himself believed in his whole. So the miracle produced faith. The miracle was for evidence. The miracle was to convince who Jesus was. And it did its job. It did its job. Okay, so that's healing number one we want to talk about tonight. There's another healing that is in some aspects similar. It's recorded in both Matthew 8 and Luke 7. Let's read Luke 7 for a minute. Luke 7, verse 1. Luke 7, verse 1. Now when he had ended all his sayings in the audience of the people, he entered into Capernaum, and a certain centurion's servant, who was dear unto him, was sick and ready to die. And when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they besought him instantly, saying that he was worthy for whom he should do this, for he loveth our nation and hath built us a synagogue. Then Jesus went with them, and when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. Wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee, but say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. For I am a man set under authority, having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, Go, and he goeth, and to another, Come, and he cometh, and to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turned him about, and said unto the people that followed him, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And they that were sent, returning to the house, found the servant whole that had been sick. All right, so the parallel account of this in Matthew 8, we won't take time to read all of Matthew 8. I think Luke's account gives a little bit more detail, but it's the same. It's the same event in Matthew chapter 8 that we just read here in Luke chapter 7. Now, the question is asked, well, is this the same one we just read about? And the answer is no. There's some significant differences. Notice, first of all, at verse 1 that Jesus is entered into Capernaum. Jesus is at Capernaum. He was at Galilee. It's Cana of Galilee. He was at Cana in that previous episode. He's at Capernaum here. So this is not the same place. In this case, it's a servant who is sick instead of a son. And furthermore, in this case, it's a centurion, not a nobleman or a royal official. So although there's some similarities in the event, this is clearly not the same event. Now, in this case, this guy's a Roman, right? He's a centurion. So he's a Roman army official. Remember, the Romans were occupying that area. And so he's a Roman soldier who is he's a centurion. He's over a band of 100 men. He's an official. He's a Roman official. He's a ranking official. What's kind of impressive about this guy is that he is kind and benevolent toward the Jewish people that he's charged with overseeing. Verse 5, he loveth our nation. He hath built us a synagogue. Remember that in Jewish cities like this, the synagogue would have been the place where they gathered on the Sabbath day to read and discuss the Old Testament scriptures. Synagogue was not the temple. The temple was only in Jerusalem, but various towns and villages would have had their synagogues, a meeting place where Jews would come together and they would read and study the scriptures. This guy, he's a Roman, but he is kind and benevolent toward the people that he's charged with policing, even to the point that it says he loves our nation. He built us a synagogue. Pretty amazing that this fellow is of that sort. And he doesn't come himself directly. In fact, even when Jesus was headed to his house to effect this healing, verse 6 says, when Jesus went with him, when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying, Lord, trouble not thyself. I'm not worthy that thou shouldest enter into my roof, under my roof. So he didn't go out and talk to Jesus about this. He sent friends, almost certainly Jewish friends, to go tell Jesus, don't come to my house. I'm not worthy for you to come into my house. Why would this centurion, this guy is a high-ranking military official. Why would he say, I'm not worthy, don't come into my house? Why would he say that? Tom?
One possibility, if he is a Roman, probably Gentile, he knew that Jesus being a Jew, that would be probably semi-offensive to him.
Okay, so
He's sort of honoring Jesus in that aspect, that because he knows basically he's familiar with Jewish.
I think you're exactly right. He's no doubt a Gentile, but he's aware of Jewish sensitivities. He knows what the Jews believe about associating with Gentiles, and he doesn't want to put Jesus in a bind, right? Wade?
You know, first thing that comes to my mind is always, did he not want Jesus there because he didn't want Jesus to be seen at his house? But when you think about Jesus' response, when Jesus said, "I'm not seeing such great faith in Israel," that couldn't have been the case, because Jesus would have been able to read his thoughts and know.
So your question is, so he doesn't want Jesus to come to his house because he doesn't want his contemporaries, he doesn't want his Roman buddies to see him associating with Jesus? Or does he not want Jesus to come because he knows that Jesus is a Jew and he's a Gentile, and he doesn't want to put Jesus? And I agree with you, it's the latter. Wayne?
It says that he considered himself not worthy.
Yeah.
So I can't buy that he didn't want his friends to know.
Right.
And the centurion, it's kind of interesting. There's nothing said bad about a centurion in Scriptures. They're always good, honorable, decent men in all the portrayals. And so it appears that this man, and his confession was, "I too am a man under authority. I say to a servant, go, and he goes, and to another, do this, and he does it." He's saying this with reference to Jesus and disease.
Yeah.
That Jesus has the authority over disease.
Yeah.
So these miracles that Jesus had performed would have been noised about. I mean, they would have been broadcast.
Highly publicized. Exactly.
Say again?
Yeah.
I didn't-
I say highly publicized.
Oh, yeah, extremely.
Yeah. Christy?
I think he had faith, and I think he just really had faith, and he didn't even think he was ready to come to Jesus.
Yeah.
He knew Jesus was more.
I think this thing about Jesus, the news about Jesus, is growing like wildfire. I mean, the news is getting out. And as you say, so why would a Roman send for Jesus if it's just Jesus is just a country bumpkin preacher? You know, he's got a handful of followers and no big deal. No, it's coming out rapidly who Jesus is and what he's doing. And so he sends for Jesus. Tom?
Maybe he'd gone through and done all he could do to heal the servant. You look back in the Old Testament about Naaman, I heard that there might be a prophet down in Israel that can heal me. Well, let me go down there and see.
Like Naaman.
Huh?
Like Naaman.
Yeah. Well, he did it. It took Naaman a few little things to turn him around and say, well, if he'd asked to do something great, he would have done it. He just asked to go dip in the river.
Yeah.
So it takes, and it looks like this person was more noble than even Naaman was.
Yeah.
Because he recognized that Jesus could do something.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You want to think real quick? It's amazing. The centurion has authority. He even says he has authority to command. And even the Jewish people, right? They were conquerors over that land. And he could have been, prideful about that. But he, for somehow, understood about that. Understood that he was something different. And he put himself. He's lowering himself. He knew he was lower in position than what Jesus was because of the things that he could be doing. He didn't probably understand it. But from his military background, he understood people who were greater than you. You don't always get to go before. If you think about what happened with the president, only a few people got to go to the inauguration, only a few people get to go to the White House. You're restricted in a lot of ways. He understood, even though he had power, there's something greater than him, and he wasn't willing to even go out there and meet him, but he understood his own power.
Yeah. I just had the word humility in my notes. There's a humility in this man. Because as you said, he's a fairly high-ranking military man. And the Romans can compel the Jews to do whatever they want them to do. Remember, Jesus said, if a man compels you to go a mile, go 2 miles. Well, the Romans could do that. The Romans could just commandeer a Jew and say, carry my bags. And they could make him carry them a mile or whatever that distance was. They didn't have miles, I know, but they could compel them to carry their gear a set distance. Jesus said, if they can compel you to carry it that far, go twice that far. That's the kind of authority that the Romans had over the Jews. They could demand that you do. There's no demand in what this man is asking for. A very humble request. But notice, he actually identifies himself, as you all have already pointed out, in verse 8, I am a man set under authority. I have under me soldiers. I say to one, go, and he goes. I say to another, come, and he comes. I'm a man who can tell people what to do, and they have to do what I tell them to do. Now, why is he saying that? In relationship to this event, how does that connect with this healing request? Anybody? Jay? Yeah.
He understood that Jesus had that same authority to demand and to expect results.
Exactly.
From whatever.
Just like I can tell my soldiers, go and come, you can say the word and this disease will be healed. That's what he's saying, exactly, right? He doesn't draw a conclusion, but Jesus does in verse 9. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him and turned him about and said to the people that were with him, I say to you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. So Jesus understood that statement for what it meant. Jesus said, that man has just expressed great faith. Tom?
It's also the centurion is not actually talking to Jesus. If you read the context, it's his friends that he gave this dictation to go tell him this.
Exactly right. So we were talking in the previous episode that we studied with the nobleman's son. That was a remote healing, but at least he saw the nobleman. In this case, he never directly saw the centurion or the sick person, and the healing took place. That's pretty incredible if you think about it. Let's see, what else have we got here? Again, the humility of him. I'm not worthy. He had the faith. He was convinced Jesus possessed the authority or power to effect this healing, and that really impressed Jesus. And the healing actually took place, apparently, at the moment when they that were sent returned to the house. They found the servant whole that had been sick. Now, this was within the same city. This all happened in Capernaum. They didn't have to go far. They didn't come far to get Jesus, and they didn't have to go far to get back home. When they got back home, the healing had already taken place. One of the things about miraculous healings that we always try to point out is they were instantaneous. You know, whenever healing took place, Jesus said, get well, and about 5 days later he was well. The healings are not like that. The healings were instantaneous, verifiable and instantaneous, which are a couple essential elements or components of these miraculous healings. We've got just a couple minutes left. Let me ask you a question. I'm guessing that you may have never heard of this, but I'll fill you in how this text is sometimes misused. So, and I think you'll be blown away to know that homosexuals want to use this text to try and justify the practice of homosexuality. That this centurion's servant was his homosexual lover. And the fact that the argument is made, that would be very common. That would be very common for a high-ranking person to have such a person in his entourage. And that's who this guy was. And the fact that Jesus healed him shows that Jesus was signing off on the practice of homosexuality. What do you think about that? Wade.
Verse verse 3 says, when he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him. Well, if the Jewish elders knew that he was a homosexual, they probably wouldn't have had anything to do with him, because the Jewish elders would have wanted to punish him by death, because that was under the law, that would have been a death sentence.
Fair point, fair point. Verse 2 is one of the verses they like to stress. A certain centurion's servant who was dear unto him was sick and ready to die. They try to make a lot of hay out of the fact that this servant was dear unto him. But this guy was a very kind and benevolent person, right? This is the guy who says he loves our nation. He built us a synagogue. The fact that he had a servant that was dear to him. I want to tell you, if you have to stretch that hard to make a point, you have no point, right? If that's the best proof you can come up with, then I'm saying you just take a seat. You got nothing there. We don't need to hear that argument, right? Any other thoughts or comments along that line?
Paralyzed and dreadfully tormented, this servant was.
Yeah.
In Matthew 8.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In Matthew 8 it says he was very dreadfully tormented. Yeah, Tom.
Could you use that same argument there, going back to Joseph? Well, Potiphar, put a lot of confidence in everything in Joseph. Joseph was very dear to him.
Yeah.
So, you can't have it one way and another way someplace else. So, it goes through that. And if he was the type of individual that these Jews saw, you would expect him to be treating his servants
Exactly.
in a proper way and be appreciative of the things they did for him.
I think you're exactly right. Other thoughts here? Anybody? Well, we've got just a minute. Let's just look over at Matthew 8. We can take a minute to read Matthew 8 to see if there's any additional thoughts there that we need to throw into this mix. Matthew 8:5. Matthew 8:5. When Jesus was entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion, beseeching him and saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home. Now, what about this? Matthew says that the centurion came to Jesus, beseeching him, saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home, sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof, but speak a word only, and thy servant shall be healed. For I am a man under authority. So, now, notice the difference between Matthew's account and Luke's account. Luke says, verse 3, Luke 7:3, when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come. Matthew's account says that he came. There came to him a centurion beseeching him. Luke's account said that he sent the elders of the Jews to beseech Jesus. Have we got a contradiction there? What do you think? How are we going to solve that? Wayne?
Well, verse 8 covers it. I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof. He didn't go into the house.
Yeah.
He obviously sent word, and when he sent word, that would have been the word of the centurion.
Yeah. So,
Speak in the name of somebody else. I'm the one talking, but it's coming from somebody else.
So, let's say that I've got some business at the courthouse, and maybe my taxes are past due. Wayne, will you go down there and tell them that I'll have them a check by noon tomorrow? And you go and you say, Greg said he'd have his property tax check here by noon tomorrow. All right, so then it gets all tangled up and I end up in court. Could I say, I told them that I would be there within 24 hours? Would that be a contradiction? Wayne is actually the one who told them that I would be there tomorrow. But it would still be fair for me to say, I told them. I told them via a messenger. I went to them via a messenger, but it was still my message, right? So I think that's the way to explain what some people would want to jump on as a contradiction. I think Luke's account is more detailed and probably gives the finer detail. He came to Jesus via messengers. He didn't come to Jesus face to face. So I think Luke's account just gives... So always when we read these gospel accounts, and when there are parallel or multiple accounts of the same episode, they dovetail. They fit together. They don't contradict. One may supply more information or more detailed, more specific information than the other, but they're not contradictory. They're supplemental. Does that make sense? All right, Tom?
Also, if you take a look at, Luke's gospel, that's right. Luke was very meticulous about and he checked multiple sources to say that this is, so what he wrote was not only chronological, but it was, the best detail as accurate as it could be. And the Holy Spirit guided him in that as well. Matthew in his writing to a different audience than Luke was writing to.
That's why sometimes the accounts give different details, but never contradictory. Always supplemental. I think that's right. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate the good comments.